Hey, there we are. We are live. I'm guessing the audio is good, so I'm just going to go and let you guys tell me if it's not. I'm Seth Payne, played 5 years for the Houston Texans, 10 years in the NFL, and wanted to jump on and talk about Tom Brady when he was on the Pivot podcast the other day. Those guys do a great job getting great guests. They've gotten CJ Stroud. What the hell? Um, there we go. Had my own voice in my ear. They do a great job. And Ryan Clark asked Tom Brady about which young players he likes watching. This is how Tom Brady answered.
Some of the guys you actually enjoy watching play because of the way they approach the game?
I mean, CJ is a good example. Like, I really appreciated where he came from and all the expectations that he had, and then what he's gone and put together last year with a lot of humility. And I could see, like, when I watch quarterbacks, the first thing I watch is, does he endear himself to his teammates? What are the things that he's saying? What are the things that he's doing to endear himself to his teammates so that he does feel like one of the guys?
Okay, so we're coming up on that portion of the season where now that the schedule's out, and I've talked a boatload about the schedule today on Sports Radio 610. I might do another little live stream here later. We'll see. But we're coming into that portion of the year where CJ has gotten nothing but love all off season long. As we ramp up and get towards training camp and all the talking heads stop trying to just make love to every fan base and start getting real about things, there are going to be a lot of people questioning, okay, is CJ Stroud primed for a sophomore slump, especially with some of the quarterbacks that the Texans will be facing this year? There are a few things that give me confidence that he won't have a sophomore slump aside from adding Stephon Diggs and various other things. But a lot of it has to do just not even as much schematically or his technique on the field or anything else like that. It's just the way he's approached things. So I would touch on two things that Brady just mentioned: the humility, because CJ references humility all the time, which, like, we know a lot of people who talk about humility as they are like using that to bolster their own reputation. CJ just earnestly talks about humility. If you go and look at any video after press conferences, there's people remarking on just how humble a kid he is. But the other part is a sincere devotion to his teammates. And a few things that were common themes this year in press conferences were the obligation that he felt to his teammates. He's talked a lot about how Ryan Day at Ohio State helped him really understand and realize that it's how important it is for you to be outwardly focused and for you to care about your teammates and for them to know that they care about you. So it's really cool to see Tom Brady recognize that in CJ Stroud. I'll point out at the end, and we'll talk about, like, CJ Stroud and Tom Brady are much different types of personalities. Like, for on-field persona, we asked our listeners earlier this week, and he said, okay, he's not Tom Brady, right? Like, I don't ever foresee CJ flipping out on the sidelines or tearing into his teammates the way Tom Brady or Peyton Manning did. I think for modern quarterbacks, he's going to be a lot more like Drew Brees, who's just hyper focused, at least in terms of on-field demeanor. A lot of people, when we asked, said Joe Montana for that, like, kind of laid back, really care about football, but really care about your teammates just as much. Brett Favre, I think, was that way too. And like, Brett Favre has a very different personality, different recreational pursuits, definitely, than CJ Stroud. That might be a little bit more on the Deshaun Watson side in some respects. But like, to illustrate this, there's just one little clip that I remembered from him talking to Michelle Beisner Buck. I believe he was talking about the feeling they had after that Colts game where they had to play in to make the playoffs.
We did something special that night, and we were going to have to do our job again the next week, and we got to be with each other for another week.
Like, okay, so that's the simple thing. We got to be with each other for another week. And I'll be honest with you, like, for quarterbacks who are hyper driven and type A type personalities and everything, like, those things don't always coexist, that you're just that focused on your teammates while also trying to achieve personal greatness. But it's just it's a constant theme with CJ, and I think it's something that Tom Brady picked up on. This is Brady on crediting your teammates and all the things that go into that.
The only way you're going to play is your teammates, because there's only so much you can do. You can't. There's so many things I sucked at, but the only way that I could get to where I wanted to get to was to have the best teammates. And the only way I could get the best teammates was if I was the best teammate.
Yeah.
So you have to talk the right way, hang the right way, celebrate the right way, lose the right way. You know.
So talk the right way, act the right way. CJ's also talked about that with Ryan Day about the importance of body language. And if you think back to some rookie quarterbacks through the years, even guys that went on to be really good, like Cam Newton. Cam Newton has talked himself about how he had to learn how important his body language is on the sideline. Remember when he was younger, he'd have the towel over his head and that's a guy that didn't need to be like that because he's got an effervescent personality. He learned that he had to project strength outwardly, especially when things are hard. CJ having been through tough times at Ohio State. I mean, when you play on that stage and when there's that much pressure on you, anytime you lose, you got to really project the right image. But as far as hanging the right way, the biggest thing that I think of, and this is especially with like CJ in comparison to some other quarterbacks, you think about like Brett Favre, Joe Montana, Jim Kelly, some of the old school guys, they are also like they're almost kind of had that almost like that military attitude of like you got to go out and drink together to bond together. CJ doesn't drink or smoke, but he's also a guy that will go out and hang out with guys and he'll go to the club and everything, but he's just very careful about how he does it. He's talked about this in interviews. I'm not breaking news or anything. Like that's important because I've played with some people who were leaders on the team and were devoutly religious and very serious about it. But it also, in some ways, sometimes put up a wall between them and the rest of their teammates. So, like that guy that can hang out with guys and not judge people, but also stay above the fray. Like that's kind of a rare combination for somebody who's also as devoutly religious as CJ is. That's another part of CJ that we'll talk a little bit about later. But in terms of how you connect, like he's a lot different than Tom Brady. Tom Brady is not a religious guy. Obviously never had an issue bonding with his teammates of all varieties. But that is one way that I think CJ really, really connects with some of the guys on the team is just through his faith. This is, in terms of crediting his teammates, this is CJ after the Tampa game when, remember, he had 5 touchdowns in that game. 5 touchdowns in the game. He was asked specifically about his performance after the game. This is what he said.
We have a special team. They put a lot of great guys around me, a lot of great protection up front, guys running crisp routes and getting yak. So, I mean, you have 46 seconds, man. It's not just me out there. It's everybody. And you see Tank running them routes.
Yeah. And Tank, obviously, he'll just always give all the credit in the world to his receivers. He's talked like literally about feeding his teammates' families. And I think he means that literally because one of the way he hangs out with guys is he's always inviting almost every single night guys over for dinner, going out for his quarterback's dinner. But like I think when he has his dinners, he's not just talking metaphorically about feeding his guys' families. I think he's taking a washing the beggar's feet type of like he is a servant leader and wants to be a servant leader, and he really lives that out. So again, I don't mean to be this just one big gush fest. Brandon, please expound. I want to know specifically about what you're talking about because yes, there are many odd things about these days. I will not be talking about women's roles in the home or anything like that. God no, don't worry. I don't touch any of those kinds of controversies. For those of you who are unaware of what I'm talking about, don't even worry about it. There's a big old thing going on with the Chiefs right now. So this is Brady on work ethic.
But people really are going to know who you are if you show up early. You put the time in. They see you how you are when you win, right after the game when you lose, how you are the next day, how you approach the week after. Everyone in the media is firing at you. Brady, you suck. You did this. You did this. They're going to know who I am by the way that I approached the next week.
Okay, so that made me think immediately of the postseason press conference, not the playoffs press conference, so I guess the postseason after they were eliminated by the Ravens. Quite rudely, as a matter of fact, they were eliminated by the Ravens. But like CJ made the point that it was really important for him to be at the facility that day. I don't think they had necessarily planned on having a press conference, but he said that it was important for them to see him for them to see him be upbeat, for them to see him being optimistic about next season. You saw him, go back to the Ohio State Pro Day to support his teammates that were still there. Like he takes the teammate part very, very, very seriously. And that's his form of leadership, which is really cool. This is the X factor and where CJ differs from Brady. And I don't mean this as a way that he's better than Brady or he's different than Brady or anything, but just like we saw this a lot. And look, I'm in terms of the devotion to religion and everything else, I'm closer to the Brady scale than the Stroud scale, but I very, very, very much respect guys like Stroud and the guys that I played with who are like him. But for those of you who haven't watched CJ all season long, this was typically him talking in a press conference at some point during the season.
For me, I mean, it's a lot of prayer, a lot of just knowing that, man, God wouldn't put anything on me that I can't handle. I don't deserve his grace and his mercy, but he still gives it to me, and I love him for that because, I mean, it's not about me, it's about him and his glory.
But the cool thing about CJ too is he's always like I told you, humility is a constant theme with him. But even when he talks about his faith, he'll usually preface it or try to maybe perhaps soften it as a way to be sure that he's not trying to ram anything down anybody's into anybody's viewpoint or anything like that. And again, in being able to relate to, talk to, reach out to all manners of different types of people. I mean, like on any given team, you're going to have evangelical Christians, you're going to have Catholics, you're going to have a Jewish guy here or there, you're going to have some atheists, like you're going to have some guys that just don't give a damn about anything and don't ever think about it at all. And as the quarterback and as the leader, you got to be able to relate to all those guys. So like he's able to be that dual person who is very religious personally, doesn't mind talking about it, but can also relate to other guys and isn't like I've been on teams sometimes where a lot of the skill position players very much felt like they better get to Bible study on Wednesday night because they felt like it might affect whether or not they got any touches on Sunday. I think JJ can separate church and football that way. There needs to be a certain separation of church and state, and there needs to be a certain separation of church and football at times. You can't be super dogmatic about all this stuff. When you compare Tom Brady as a football player and as a leader, I think, a lot of people are going to hear what he said earlier, and they're going to remember moments like this. Like, I think these are all from his last season in Tampa. He could get a little heated on the sideline. He could get a little overboard at times. I think I've got even another clip. This was one game. He's going back for another taste. Okay, yeah, this is a separate game. This one he's wearing a hat and tearing into his offensive line. The biggest thing, like I played against Peyton Manning, played against guys that were world-class ball busters when it came to, like, I honestly, there are times when I was playing against the Colts where I kind of, I almost started feeling bad for the offensive lineman because he'd be tearing it. He'd be so brutal with them. But there's two things that go into that. Whether you do it by shouting or whether you do it just by holding guys to high standards, like as a leader, whatever your leadership style is, you do have to hold those guys to very high standards. And I think that's something that CJ, as he's built this respect, I don't think he's going to do it by yelling and screaming at people. But I think he's going to hold people to very high standards. They will love you for it, whether you're screaming or not, if A, you're an awesome quarterback, and B, they understand that you're doing it simply out of love for the team and for driving the team the same place that they want to go. And I think that Brady, has there ever been a person that complained about the fact that Tom Brady yelled at me and it was destroyed me? No, it's because he's awesome. And he's doing it all for the greater good of the team. And I think CJ likewise, I could see with CJ again, like with Drew Brees, I don't know if I can ever remember him yelling at anybody on the sideline, but he ran so many routes with those guys, over and over and over again. The repetition, just the constant practice. He was very demanding in that regard. They would go out before the game and have a warm-up before the warm-up where they'd do the entire route tree with every guy over and over and over again because the timing was so important. So, Drew Brees is a role model for CJ. CJ's talked about how he watched his YouTube videos growing up, learned about that compact throwing motion and everything else. So, you know what? I was thinking about this in the life of Colby. He was getting pissed when Dieter's jersey was full of sweat. I wish I had that clip to pull up. Remember how calm he was about it, though? He kind of was like, hey, he went over, took care of it by talking to the equipment manager to see if he could get Dieter's jersey swapped out. Got it swapped out. So let's see. CJ leads by example every day. No need to yell when everyone knows their role on Sundays. Yeah, I'm the last person that thinks that you got to be a yeller and a screamer. Some of my favorite coaches of all time were yellers and screamers, and some of them were very soft spoken. You know, like Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator is one of my favorite people ever because he unlocked something in me in that scheme that made me a completely different football player than I had been before. Fangio's not somebody that's going to yell. Like Dick Duran, you guys might remember, he was my defensive coordinator for a couple of years. Loved him, and he was very soft spoken. Likewise, like Frank Gant Sr. was a special teams coach we had when I was young, who was he was a Naval Academy grad who was just like he was brutal. Like he was brutal, but he would always make the point. This is the key. He'd always say, I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking the person. I'm attacking the problem. We both have a problem. We both want to get to the same place, and we need you to be able to do this technique or perform whatever you're doing. I'm not attacking you, but I am attacking the problem with great intensity and with great urgency. And he would make that distinction. Like, okay, yeah, that's right. Don't take this personal. We're both attacking the same problem here. He's just communicating the urgency. Let's see. I am in the CJ's feeling himself too much camp. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I'm not agreeing with you. I'm going to say yes, but I understand the sentiment. Call me off my lawn guy. Get off my lawn guy. He's only 22, but I think he thinks he's got the world figured out. Which would be the opposite of humility. I disagree with you there. I do think I've been somebody that said from the very beginning, I do think that because of his life experience, I think he does have a maturity that, like, I don't know if I still have, but I definitely didn't have until I was maybe 40 or so. And that's in his willingness to look past people's faults because of his personal situation. For those of you who don't know, when he was 13 or 14 years old or so, his father got sent away to prison on a long jail sentence. And he's talked about how he was very resentful of a lot of things at that time. And it took him a few years, I think, until he got to Ohio State before he kind of returned to some of the things with his faith and what have you, because he said his father had been a pastor at the church, and all those people that they used to go and help every weekend, they were gone. They abandoned him, and he talks about it now with like zero resentment and this understanding of like, okay, this is human nature to a certain degree, and these are things that you just accept about human beings. Like I didn't have that ability to look past people who had wronged me, or I thought they had wronged me, or people who were just screwed up human beings until I was well into adulthood. So I think it's natural to be concerned about perhaps being on the CJ World Tour and everything. I get a little bit nervous about him hanging out with Micah, but I disagree with you there. I think there is still a genuine humility there, but there is also, look, one of the hardest things in the world is to maintain genuine humility while being a star or burgeoning star quarterback in the NFL or a player in the NBA or a Major League Baseball player, because you constantly all day long, A, have to carry yourself with a certain level of confidence, but B, people are talking about you. Like they're asking about you, they're talking about you, they're making you the subject of the stories they're doing. Like, and to try to subjugate your ego and not let that go to your head, it's a constant battle for those guys. And it's honestly, I'm honestly surprised that more people don't blow up in a bad way than do. And I don't worry about CJ. I think he's aware of that struggle. CJ will punch a cat in the mouth on the field and ask for forgiveness. It comes from his agent. Okay, it's David Mulligetta thing. Well, the trip to China and some of the stuff with Micah Parsons, that's all set up through Mulligetta and what's the guy's name? Brian Burney. Is that the business manager? But like, I don't like that's all just, doing that stuff. I'm cool with it. But I appreciate the counterpoint. I appreciate that he professes his faith as long as it is genuine. You're right. Yeah. And that's, again, we are living hard times, and the only thing that can help us make us through is our faith in God. In terms of like, look, I've been in and around the NFL since 1997. I can spot the phonies, and I usually keep my mouth shut about it because like that doesn't help anybody or do anything for anybody. I'd be extremely surprised if CJ was a phony about it. I've gotten a pretty good feel about this stuff over the years. I'm Seth Payne. played for the Texans a long time ago. Now I do sports radio on Sports Radio 610. I might do a schedule release reaction, a very delayed one. Everything that needs to be said has already been said, but it hasn't been said by me. So I might do that a little bit later or tomorrow. So thanks, everybody. Please like, subscribe, share it on Facebook or something if you're so inclined. Thanks for, and thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me for 20 minutes.